Hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today so we can talk about an incredibly important issue across the country. I am Amelia Sykes. I am honored to represent Ohio's 13th Congressional District in Congress and honored to be with such an amazing group of colleagues, including Congresswomen Cheryl, Lee, Manning, Custer, and our very own Whip, Catherine Clark. I also want to say thank you to our incredible reproductive rights partners as we introduce a critical resolution to reaffirm the right to emergency abortion care across the country. Since the overturn of Roe v. Wade more than 2 years ago, we've heard horrifying stories of pregnant women being turned away from emergency rooms or unable to receive the life-saving care that they need due to cruel state abortion bans. Even though the Federal Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, also known as EMTALA, requires emergency rooms to treat and stabilize pregnant patients. I'm sure many of you will recall the story of Brittany Watts, a 34-year-old pregnant woman from Ohio in Trumbull County, just a county over from my district. Earlier this year, last year, she sought medical help not once, not twice, but 3 times when she was having complications in her pregnancy. After her 3rd trip to the emergency department, she unfortunately did not receive the care that she needed, but she was referred for prosecution. Brittany's story is unfortunately not the only one. There are so many more women who have miscarried in public bathrooms, gone into septic shock, or even needed blood transfusion simply because they were unable to get the care they needed when they needed it the most. Brittany, of course, did not get that care, but as I said before, she was prosecuted and she had to go through a very tragic and trying time very publicly and emotionally, all because she did not receive the emergency care that she needed when she needed it the most. But the problem does not just stop at patients. Healthcare providers who take a medical oath to simply do no harm and are working every single day to save people's lives, even in these emergency situations, are challenged because they may lose their jobs, they may lose their medical licenses, and they may lose their freedom and be sent to jail. In June, the Supreme Court had the opportunity to right this wrong and to make it clear that EMTALA protects access to emergency abortions in every state through the Moyle v. United States case. But they punted, and they left women in limbo. The Supreme Court's ruling only increased chaos and uncertainty, leaving more women in danger and the door wide open for future attacks on reproductive health care. So let me be clear. Women should be able to access the reproductive health care when they need it, whenever they need it, but especially if they are in a life or death situation. And that's why I'm co-leading this important resolution with Congresswoman Cheryl to reaffirm that EMTALA guarantees emergency medical care, including abortion care, for all Americans, no matter where they live. EMTALA was passed in the year I was born, 1986, and it was to right the wrong of patient dumping. When patients would come to an emergency room in their most vulnerable and concerning medical states. And now, 38 years later, in 2024, I have the responsibility, I feel like I have the responsibility as a member of Congress to reaffirm and right the wrongs that we saw 38 years ago. Not only as a mandate from the people in my community in Ohio's 13th district, but all across this country. This resolution that we are introducing is a way to say unequivocally and on the record, EMTALA provides the certainty and clarity that women across the country need in their most dire and concerning medical emergencies. We know that today's resolution is a critical step, not the only step that is needed to protect abortion care in this country, as we see extreme Republicans in this Congress and in state houses all across the country and their continued efforts to criminalize women, doctors, and abortion care. My House Democratic colleagues and I will continue to fight for your protections, for your freedom, and your ability to make your own reproductive health care decisions. So again, I would like to say thank you to everyone who is here today, to my colleagues and all of those who care about the freedom of women and our ability to make decisions for our own in our own lives. And again, a special thank you to our reproductive advocacy groups who are here today, who you also hear from, including Regina Davis Moss from In Our Own Voice, National Black Women's Reproductive Justice Agenda, Dr. Amy Burkett, one of my constituents, fellow of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and Gretchen Borchet, Vice President for Reproductive Rights Health, National Women's Law Center. We cannot do this work alone. Thank you for what you do. So let me pass the program over to my co-lead, Congresswoman Cheryl, to continue the program.
Thank you so much. Wow. Well, it's truly an honor to be here today to continue the fight on behalf of women across the nation. You know, we're here today with a simple yet critical message. Women in America should not be on their deathbed to receive an abortion. This June, Donald Trump's handpicked Supreme Court again failed to protect women's health care. After agreeing to hear a challenge from Idaho with one of the most extreme abortion bans in the nation, the court refused to affirm the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act which guarantees access to emergency abortion care nationwide. Justice Alito, in his dissent, said the court has simply lost the will to decide the easy but emotional and highly politicized question that the case presents. Apparently, Justice Alito thinks women, including his fellow justices on the Supreme Court, are just too emotional about abortion. It shows not only a breathtaking ignorance about the law, but also about women's health. Because take a look at the chaos and heartbreak happening across the country as a result of these dangerous MAGA abortion bans. 2 women, one in Florida and one in Texas, were left to miscarry in public restrooms. In Arkansas, a woman went into septic shock and her fetus died after an emergency room sent her home. And in Idaho, women are being medevaced out of the state simply to get basic reproductive health care. An Associated Press analysis found more than 100 pregnant women in medical distress who sought help from emergency rooms and were turned away or negligently treated since 2022. It's an outrage. Lives are at risk. And despite clear federal law and additional guidance from the Biden administration, states across the country are refusing to treat pregnant women in emergencies and even threatening doctors with prison time for performing an emergency abortion. During oral arguments before the Supreme Court on Idaho's draconian abortion ban, Justices Kagan and Sotomayor asked about real-world hypotheticals, tragic scenarios of conditions that could cause a woman to lose her reproductive organs, such as preterm premature rupture of membranes, but wouldn't necessarily be life-threatening, conditions that EMTALA clearly covers. When asked if abortions in those scenarios are covered under Idaho law, Idaho's attorney couldn't give a straight answer. In fact, Justice Barrett said she was, quote, shocked by the lack of clarity in his answers. That's why we're introducing this resolution today, to make abundantly clear that federal law, EMTALA, guarantees a woman's right to emergency care, including abortion. We must take action not only to protect women's lives, but also their health. And that House and Senate Democrats will not rest until we restore full abortion rights for women across the country. And thank you so much for all of the women here today who are fighting hard in the House and have fought hard in the House for many years to protect these rights. Thank you.
Now we'll hear from our whip, Catherine Clark.
Thank you so much for my colleagues, Congresswoman Sykes and Congresswoman Cheryl, for leading the charge today, and 2 indispensable leaders of our caucus on this critical topic. I also want to thank Barbara Lee and the Pro-Choice Caucus and my colleagues who are here for their diligent leadership. And thank you to the extraordinary advocates who have joined us for lending your voices, sharing your stories, and devoting your energy to defending the lives of women and girls across this country. There's only one reason that we have to be here today. And that is Donald Trump and the extremists in the House and in Congress who have pledged their loyalty to him and forgotten about the health and well-being of women in the country. They are the reason that Roe was overturned. They're the reason women are being denied basic health care in more than 20 states. They're the reason Idaho sued to overturn the federal right to emergency abortion care. We're here because MAGA extremism has put women's lives at risk across America. We're here because emergency health care is a legal right and a moral obligation. This is a straightforward resolution. For Democrats, it's common sense. It's about freedom. We believe in the freedom to control your own body. We believe in the freedom to get the health care you need to stay alive. We believe in keeping the courtroom out of the emergency room. House Democrats are standing up for the rights, health, and survival of women and girls. The country is watching. When the MAGA majority once again fails to stand on the side of freedom, make no mistake, the American people will remember. We are privileged to be joined by so many advocates today and a renowned healthcare leader to discuss just how high the stakes are for women across the country. So please welcome the President and CEO of In Our Own Voice, Dr. Regina Davis Moss.
Thank you to Congresswoman Sykes and Congresswoman Sherrill for their leadership in introducing this very important resolution that affirms that every pregnant person's right to emergency care should happen, and it should include abortion care. My name is Dr. Regina Davis Moss, and I am the President and CEO of In Our Own Voice, National Black Reproductive Justice Agenda. At In Our Own Voice, we advocate for policies that advance a reproductive justice framework and champion full bodily autonomy for Black women, girls, and gender-expansive people. The Supreme Court's failure to affirm that hospitals are required to provide life-saving abortion care when patients are in need of stabilizing emergency treatment has left many in extremely dangerous and sometimes dire situations. Pregnant people, especially Black women and birthing people, continue to live in fear of not being able to receive the essential medical care they may need when they need it most. Any effort to deny critical care to a pregnant person during a medical emergency is a direct attack on my community. At a time when Black women are more than 3 times more likely to die during pregnancy-related causes, and with nearly 55% of all Black women of reproductive age living in states with abortion restrictions, we cannot limit access to the full spectrum of reproductive care, and that includes access to abortion care. For Black communities and other marginalized communities, the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade, and the ongoing maternal health crisis has exacerbated poor pregnancy outcomes and the fear of criminalization. In Our Own Voice, we recently released a poll that said Black communities found the recent bans have made 4 in 10 of women of reproductive age, that's 39%, consider their own risk of death if they got pregnant, and 1 in 3 are living in restrictive states that they have thought about being arrested due to something related to their pregnancy. Baseless attacks on our bodily autonomy only exacerbate those fears. While courts cautiously and callously discuss whether people experiencing emergencies during their pregnancy should receive care, pregnant people, especially Black people, continue to live in fear of not being able to receive the essential medical care they need. The introduction of this resolution reaffirms the importance of the protection of EMTALA for all pregnant people, but especially Black women and other communities of color, and it disproportionately experience poor birth outcomes that require emergency care. The right to emergency care during pregnancy must be protected. Reproductive autonomy should never be left to the decisions of a few. In Our Own Voice is proud to stand with the leaders here in support of this resolution and to continue our collective fight for reproductive justice. Thank you again to Congresswoman Sykes and Congresswoman Sherrill for introducing this resolution and helping to ensure a person's right to emergency care.
Thank you so very much for those important words. As you know, Congress is always changing, so I'm going to call a quick audible here and introduce a longtime leader in our pro-choice caucus co-chair, Representative Barbara Lee of California.
Thank you very much and good morning. Let me thank you, Representative Sykes, and also Representative Sherrill for leading this important resolution and for calling attention to it today. As well as, of course, our whip and our fierce defender of reproductive freedom, our warrior women who are here with us today and part of our pro-choice caucus. And to all of the activists, thank you so much for your leadership and leading the way. Now that we're back in Washington, it's really important to remember what happened right before we left this summer. This spring, the United States Supreme Court heard arguments in the highest court of the land, of course. The disagreement was whether a state has the right to not only violate federal law, but to let women die in the interest of their extreme ideology. Then this summer, Trump's Supreme Court justices did not affirm the right to emergency abortion care under federal law as they should have. They just punted. And I remembered the days before Roe, and I know how dangerous they were personally. And so like all medical emergencies, emergency abortion care is frightening, and it's dangerous. It's often heartbreaking. For so many American people, it's the devastating end to a hopeful chapter. In America today, the fear, the vulnerability, the danger, and the devastation are that much more now elevated. Now providers are afraid that they might get arrested or lose their careers for acting in the interests of their patients. Now women are sent home to get deathly ill or to bleed out in parking lots before medical facilities will give them the care that they need. This is quite frankly, inhumane and immoral. And now they're forced to continue being worried about losing their reproductive organs or even limbs when it was completely, mind you, completely preventable. Now pregnant patients in the worst moments of their lives are being taken out of their state on helicopters for the basic medical treatment that they're entitled to under federal emergency medical law. Because let's be clear about this one point. The Donald Trump Supreme Court's temporary dismissal of this case does nothing, mind you, but return us to the status quo for now. And a return of the status quo only underscores the crisis that is the norm for millions of people since the court's decision to overturn Roe versus Wade 2 years ago. For millions, the threat still looms that even in an emergency, their right to care could be questioned, undermined, and attacked by anti-abortion extremists, with devastating consequences as we see all too often. And yes, I'm very proud to serve as the co-chair of the Pro-Choice Caucus along with Congresswoman Diana DeGette, and really proud to fight for people's freedom to make their own, and that's what this is about, their own medical decisions, especially now when those decisions are a matter of life or death. As extremist Republicans, both in Congress and across the nation, are making dangerous progress in their fight to control women's bodies and lives, we as Democrats are standing here to remind them that they have no right to make your medical decisions. No politician, no court justice, no one has that right but yourself. And once and for all, we affirm the right of every person in America and every state in America to emergency care, including abortion care. And so thank you again very much, Congresswoman Sykes, for your leadership. And thank all of you very much for making sure that this is a life-affirming effort. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Lee. Before I bring up Dr. Burkett, I do want to acknowledge an additional colleague who's here, Ayanna Presley from the great state of Massachusetts, but turn the program over now to Dr. Burkett.
Thank you, Congresswoman Sykes, for inviting me here to speak today. My name is Dr. Amy Burkett. I work as an OBGYN hospitalist in Ohio, running a busy emergency room in a tertiary care center in Congresswoman Sykes' district. Working in this setting can be incredibly challenging because we see some of the most serious and urgent obstetric emergencies. I help my patients through some of the scariest moments of their lives, and my team and I are able to do this because of our advanced training and expertise. Unfortunately, the Dobbs decision affected our ability to treat the patients in front of us. During the initial 6 weeks post-Dobbs, Ohio was under a 6-week abortion ban. And during that time, I actually carried a defense attorney's business card with me because I was fearful I would have to provide emergency care that would be considered a felony in Ohio. Thankfully, I was never personally in that position, but many of my colleagues around the country were and continue to be placed in that position. I knew if it came down to it, I would choose to provide the evidence-based health care that my patients needed because I took an oath to care for the women in my community. Abortion is health care. Abortion is sometimes life-saving health care. Politics has no place in my exam rooms. During the time I was practicing under Ohio's bans, I did have to tell patients I could not give them local referrals for pregnancy terminations. I had to refer them out of state. When I told these patients they would have to go out of state for care, all of them cried, as they had no idea how they would afford to travel. Most of them had no idea they were even pregnant prior to coming to the emergency room for care. This is not how healthcare is supposed to work. We've already seen that these abortion bans are leading to terrible outcomes for patients, especially in emergency care situations. We know this is going to lead to increased maternal morbidity and mortality, particularly for our vulnerable patient populations. We know that people working to attack abortion rights are not going to stop, and that there will be further attacks on access to emergency abortion care. We need solutions to ensure that every person has access to evidence-based, life-saving abortion care without political and legislative interference. Thank you. And I will now turn the podium over to Gretchen.
Thank you, Dr. Burkett. Good morning, everyone. I'm Gretchen Borschelt, the Vice President for Reproductive Rights and Health at the National Women's Law Center. And I want to start by thanking Whip Clark and Representative Sykes, Representative Cheryl, Co-Chair Lee, and all the congressional champions here today for bringing us together this morning. We're here today because pregnant people's health and lives are on the line, even though we have a federal law that protects people in emergency situations. That law, EMTALA, guarantees emergency care, including for pregnant people who need abortion care. And that should be the end of it, but it's not. We have to be here today because extremist politicians in states like Idaho and Texas want their state abortion bans to override the federal right to emergency care, denying pregnant people their EMTALA right. The Supreme Court should have shut down that extreme, overreaching, and dangerous argument. But instead, the Supreme Court dodged the question. It refused to affirm that EMTALA protects people in need of emergency abortion care. That case continues in Idaho in the Ninth Circuit. And there's another case that's resulted in Texans losing their full EMTALA rights when it comes to abortion care. We know what happens to pregnant people when they're denied emergency abortion care, and you've heard some examples already. I'll just mention one of our clients who was denied emergency abortion care by hospitals in Kansas and Missouri when her water broke at 18 weeks. She had to crisscross state lines until she was finally able to get the care she needed at an abortion clinic in Illinois. Her life was put at risk, and she has endured irreparable harm and trauma, physical and mental suffering, and financial hardship that is still ongoing today. It's not just patients. As you just heard, providers are at risk of criminalization. They're confused and unsure of what they should do. Hospitals are scared of running afoul of state bans and aggressive anti-abortion state officials. This climate of fear and confusion is purposeful and it's unacceptable. That's why this resolution is so important. It affirms that every person has the basic right to emergency health care, including abortion care. This resolution does what the Supreme Court should have done, but didn't. And it's putting those justices on notice for when that case returns to them. So we thank these congressional champions for their leadership and for recognizing the humanity and dignity of pregnant people like our client. And we will be right there alongside them every step of the way until everyone has the dignity, safety, and care they deserve. Thank you. And I'll turn it back to Representative Sykes.
So again, I would like to express my gratitude for everyone who's joined our press conference today, but particularly for those who continue to fight for freedom, to fight for autonomy, to fight for dignity for American women in every corner of this country. We do have time for a couple questions. I do know it is very hot, and so I want to be mindful to everyone, but if there are any questions from members of the press, we'd be happy to answer. Well, it sounds like we wrapped it all up in our remarks, or you all are burning up. So either way, thank you so much for your time, and we hope that you all join us in this fight for freedom and defending the dignity and the autonomy of American women all across this country. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.